Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindy Baldy, and this is my husband and co-host, Jeffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Management Muse. This week is a two-parter on resilience. In part one, this episode, we cover what resilience is and how it is a uniquely important skill in today's world. We also discuss tools that can help you overcome adversity before and during significant negative events. In part two, we discuss tools to strengthen resiliency after adversity has occurred. Without further ado, thanks for joining us on part one of Resiliency. Thank you for joining us on Management Muse today.
Yellow.
In today's episode, we are talking about resilience. And just to give you a quick overview of what resilience is, if you think about a car getting dinged up and going to the auto body shop and getting those dings pulled out, well, that is essentially resilience. We're all getting dinged up at some point in time, and if you can get the dents out then and not carry around the trauma, then you're pretty resilient.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
And so tell us, from your opinion, why is resilience important today?
Yeah, why are we talking about it today? Because we've been coaching people and companies for about 20 years now, and it seems like there's a lot more fatigue and exhaustion than I've seen in decades right now. And it's a little bit surprising, I think, because on the face of it, things aren't terrible, but people, I think, have a sense that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of change, whether that's in organizations, in states, in countries across the world. And I think that there's a sense that with a lot of that change, to use your car analogy example, with so much going on, you just increase the chance for getting dings. Just like if I'm always on the road, the chances that I'm going to get in a wreck go up a little bit. And so I think there's just a velocity of change that makes resilience more timely, because that causes more collisions of all kinds. And then I think people are tired. I think
it's been a long run of a lot of people trying to hold it together.
Yeah.
And at the end of that run, there's less willpower.
Yeah.
And then we're automatically dinging each other up more.
Yeah. Yeah, less of a reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also think that there's a sense from a lot of people that we talk to that things are okay now, but I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Right. And I mean, actually unemployment's fairly low, and, salaries are going up. And so on the surface at an individual level, you'd think that might be actually pretty good, the consumer sentiments. But, they're now tossing around a word called vibe session.
Vibe session.
And Kyla Scanlon is the one who coined that term. And basically, we're kind of gloomy, not necessarily for, there's a lot going on, but, on the surface, individuals should actually be doing doing all right. More people are employed than previously.
And wages are going up.
And so, but if we feel gloomy about it, if our sentiment's down, we might actually wind up in a recession. And so she's coined it as a vibe session.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where the mood might be actually leading the recession.
Yeah. So, it makes it timely. It's a good topic to talk about.
It does.
Yeah. You want to talk about science?
Sure. We'll talk about the science.
Okay.
So I'm going to tell you a story about my mom.
Oh, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Never get tired of those.
Mm-hmm. I know she's a handful, that Patty. A number of years ago, my dad, actually it was 2002, my dad had an aneurysm. Mm. And this aneurysm left him bedridden. And so
paralyzed.
Well, not completely paralyzed, but
kind of from the waist down, wasn't it?
Pretty much. Like it was basically one leg wouldn't work. It was like stuck up like a flamingo, and we couldn't get it back down. And so that prevented him from being back on his feet. So anyway, he came from the rehab, and we weren't ready for him to move home because we were building an addition for him. And so we had him in this beautiful nursing home. It was like a resort nursing home.
Yeah.
And it was about an hour away from our house. And
Yeah, waiting for the house to get
Yes, it was a temporary shift to make sure that he was taken care of.
Because he's a big guy. He's 6 feet.
Yeah, he's 6'2", I think, and he's 6'2", and we needed the setup.
Yeah, we were just dating at the time, so I was a bystander as this stuff was going down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And unfortunately, the nursing home was like Hotel California. It was beautiful, but had like all sorts of darkness hidden inside of it. And so we'd go in and like the nurses would be asleep.
Nice.
Yeah, and then we would check his schedule, and like he wasn't getting the medicines on time.
Hey, yeah.
And so
I'm sure that's not important medicine.
No,
right?
No, especially not
at a nursing home. No big deal.
Right. And so my mom got disgusted with this, and we still weren't ready.
Right.
But she was like, screw it, we're going to move out the dining room table, and he'll stay in the dining room until his room's ready. And so she goes down there, and she's just done. And they start telling her that she will be charged criminally if anything happens to him, that, basically she's going to go to prison. And my mom, you just don't threaten my mom.
No, I don't recommend
She
it.
does not have that kind of disposition where she caves. In fact, that just I think solidifies the steel. And so she looked at the lady and she said, "You're going to call an ambulance, and that ambulance better be going to Laconia," which is where she lives. And so my mom basically broke my dad out of a nursing home.
Jailbreak.
And then she spent the next 9 years overseeing his care. We did have helpers, but she did a lot of work.
Yeah, I remember that.
And she took on...
We got married in between that.
Yeah, we did. And so she took on managing very labor-intensive businesses, also doing everything she did before, also took on managing the household and all these caretakers.
Yeah.
And so she had just a ton on her plate, and I'd go visit, and she'd go to bed. I'd be in bed at like 9, and she'd go to bed at midnight and be back up at 5 a.m. And
hardcore.
Yeah, and I was just exhausted because you're kind of sad being up there. Yeah. And I just remember thinking, my mother is a lot tougher than me.
Yeah.
So, and that's lesson number 1 from the research is that resiliency isn't always stable. And so that's the good news in a sense, because
whatever you are today,
it doesn't,
tomorrow you could be stronger.
Right, and we don't even know what we are until we're challenged.
That's true.
And resiliency has nothing to do with like being a strong person, because, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But so she was very resilient in this. My mother found a way to make life work. I had told
9 years.
I told her originally, sell everything, use the money to enjoy your life, because this is and take care of Dad. This is going to be terrible. And she kept everything going, and she really didn't show any signs of any distress. And so,
but he's paralyzed and in a bed for 9 years, pretty much.
Yes. Yes. But his personality would come out.
Yeah.
And so, my mom showed tremendous resilience, and then and so my dad passed away and time went on. And so here's the other side of the story on sort of this key lesson that resilience it's not stable over time. And so the other side of the story is also a patty cake story. And so in recent years, she was coming out of a bank drive-through, and she didn't have her seatbelt on, and she was easing forward to try to let the person behind her come in, and she was pulling her seatbelt over her to reattach it, and the car just took off on her. And she went through a wooden fence, because she went straight from the drive-through, and so she went through a wooden fence and luckily went right through the two, metal, I don't know if it's steel, but metal supports. And so she went through the wood. She went over, in the process, a cement parking stopper, and then she eventually hit a brick wall, all while not wearing a seatbelt because she had taken it off to lean over for the drive up. And, she obviously had a lot of medical issues, and we went up there and spent time with her and so forth. And this person who has been an unstoppable force and been super tough. I mean, really, honestly, she came out amazingly well for what she had gone through. But this is a person who used to say, I've got at least 10 more years in me. She's 84 years old. I've got at least 10 more years in me.
Yep.
And she went from that to, I think it's time. I think I want to go. And I'm like, you just hit a brick wall going like 30 miles per hour. Like,
and a month ago you were saying you want to live for 10 more years.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so I'm like, I think maybe we need to dial that back in. But she broke. And so again, like resiliency isn't necessarily stable. The good news is that it's not something you're born with.
Yeah.
It's skills that you learn. And sometimes you'll be better at employing those skills, and sometimes it'll just be so much on your plate that everybody, hopefully you don't face it, but everybody does have a breaking point.
Yeah.
And, my mom's doing better today. She's stopped thinking that she wants to die. I don't know if she's back to a whole nother 10 years.
Yeah, I don't think it's what she wanted to die. She just gave up.
She gave up, yeah.
She had, for 9 years, a phenomenally resilient response to your dad's stroke. And then...
And even after she was saying
sure.
I got more in me. I got more in the tank.
Yeah. Even after he was dead.
Right.
So it's not a grief thing.
And when she first landed in the hospital after running into the wall, she was like, under no circumstances do I want to do not resuscitate. Like, she's like, I'm living.
Yeah.
And she had a bunch of surgeries and pain. And
after the accident. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's good. Whatever you were last time doesn't mean you're going to be that next time. Sometimes that's for good. Sometimes it's not for good. But it opens up the possibility of building the muscle a little bit.
Right.
Building more of the habit to try to bend and not break.
And maybe have a little bit of a buffer.
Yeah.
When the adversity hits. Because everybody gets some... I'm not aware of anybody who doesn't get some form of adversity eventually.
Yeah.
And so it's just trying to have yourself in a good place so you can handle the adversity.
Yeah.
So 2 lessons that come out of the research. One is that resiliency isn't stable, and the other is everybody has a breaking point.
Yeah.
We're just trying to not get there.
Yeah.
And so there's a third point. Yes,
with our good friend Moonbeam.
Mm-hmm. And it's not all adversity causes trauma. And why don't you tell them about Moonbeam?
Yeah. I mean, this guy I served with in the Army. And then when I left the service in 99, he stayed in. He went Special Forces. And so he was a Special Forces officer when 9/11 happened. And so for the next 15 years or so, he was everywhere. I mean, Iraq, Afghanistan, plus heaven knows how many other places. And so he was in the stuff, doing stuff that friends of ours who weren't even as directly engaged as him got dented up doing.
And had some trouble getting those dents out.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yet this guy, Moonbeam, never touched him. I mean, we talked to him, and we've even talked about the stuff that he did, and he has absolutely no problem. No dent, just kind of sailed through it all.
Tell him about trying to get the disability.
Right. Everybody tells him, hey, you should, look just the places you've been. You should sign up. They're going to just look at your record and give you PTSD because of everything you've done and everywhere you've been. But he won't lie. So he goes into the interviews and they're like, do you have trouble sleeping? And he's, no. Do you ever look back with regret on the things you did in the service? No. Do you ever get nightmares? No. Just he can't even make it through the first 2 or 3 questions of the survey. And the psychiatrist or psychologist is like, look, I see where you've been, but
you don't have PTSD.
Yeah, you're fine. And he is. He's completely and totally fine. So yeah, really a great example of not all adversity causes trauma. And that's where resilience comes in. Mm-hmm. Like you said, at some point we're all going to catch periods and patches of different degrees, varying degrees of adversity. but it does not all have to become trauma.
Hello, musers. Now it's time for commercial break.
Talk about ODL, on-demand leadership, and our strategy product. It's been amazing to us over the years of doing this work. Because you put together smart people, most of the time, what they do in a strategy conversation is after about 2 hours of thinking about strategy, default to either problem solving or goal setting. Neither of those are strategies. Strategy is something that gives you an advantage, something you see that your competitors don't, or something you can do that your competitors can't. And if you implement this successfully, in a year or two, you'll be in a fundamentally different position. It's taken us many years to figure out how to do this right. We finally got it to where we're making a big difference in the places that we're deploying this. Please do not go alone on a strategic planning process. Give us 3 days with your group and we can actually help you get a strategic plan that's strategic. Call us, email, ondemandleadership.com. And so we kind of remember what to do during as the 3 A's, which we'll talk about is acknowledgement, acknowledge, adjust, and then act. And so we'll start with the first one, acknowledgement. So my dad has Alzheimer's, and it's been kind of progressing, I would say
2 years.
Yeah, slowly, and now pretty quick.
Sometimes it takes steps down.
Yeah. And so, that's an adversity. And it's created a lot of emotions that I'm surprised by. And one of the main ones is that it's very easy to get frustrated because you have to repeat yourself a lot. So you get frustrated with my dad, but he has Alzheimer's, right? So it's obviously counterproductive for me to feel that emotion. It's obviously the opposite of what I want to be doing, getting frustrated with somebody for forgetting. And so getting frustrated with my dad, specifically for forgetting.
Because he's very sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. Very happy, great personality, just doesn't remember anything. And we were, I guess been a month now, maybe 6 weeks. Mm. We were at the end of having lunch, and there was a cake or a brownie or something for dessert, but no ice cream. And he wanted ice cream. So I'm like, all right, that's good. Let's go get ice cream. And so we get in the car and the two of us take off to go get ice cream. And we drive about 15 minutes. I take him to Dairy Queen because he likes Dairy Queen. We go to the drive-through. He gets a big cone, the whole deal, right? The kind of cheapest bang for your buck happiness around. Like, $2? And, makes him happy. And so by the time we get there, though, he's forgotten where we're going, what we're doing. And so we're in the drive-through. I roll the window down. They're talking, what would you like? Can I take your order? And he's like, hey, what are we doing here? And I'm like, well, we're getting ice cream. He's like, oh, okay, get whatever you want. And I'm like, well, actually, I don't really want any. He's like, yeah, neither do I. And my response was, yes, you do. Yeah, you do. And of course, his response is, no, I don't. And so I realized, okay, all right, I'm not getting anywhere here. Just what am I doing? And they're still talking, can I help you? Can I help you? And I'm like, oh, no, actually we're good. So I put up the window and we drive away. And we're just talking about other things. And I try to, let it go. And about 5 minutes later, he's like, hey, were we supposed to get something while we were out? And I said, yeah, we're supposed to get ice cream. He's like, well, looks like there's a store over there. And sure enough, there was. And so we turn in, we pick up a carton of ice cream and bring it home. He's happy. I'm happy. Everybody at the house is happy. They get some ice cream. And I remember that incident for a lot of reasons, but mostly because embedded in that story is the way that I want to respond to the adversity that this situation is bringing. I want to see it for what it is. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. But that doesn't mean that I can't learn and adjust and adapt throughout and try to increase the number of days that are high quality. And so that's kind of, if we're talking about during adversity, what is it that we recommend based on the literature and the science? And I would say, to some extent, to our own experiences as well. This first plank for during adversity is make sure that you acknowledge what you're dealing with.
I think it's seeing it, looking the situation actually in the eye. Like there's sometimes a tendency to, it's protective. And so we'll try to be optimistic about it in a way that sometimes leads us to distort reality. Yeah. And really you have to look it in the eye and deal with it the way that it is, accept the way that it is. So then you can go forward and plan and react. And so, Ron's case is interesting because
that's my dad.
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. And so it's interesting because it's a continual process of looking his current reality in the eye. So as he sort of takes these steps, down in terms of memory, each step is an adjustment for all of us.
Yeah.
Where we have to look at where he is and accept where he is and then try to figure out how to get there with him.
Yeah.
I'm going to go on to plank number 2.
All right.
Or technique number 2. So we call it adjust. And this is, just very briefly, a lot of this stuff is Martin Seligman's work. And he's like the father of positive psychology. And he does all sorts of interesting stuff.
A University of Pennsylvania professor.
And basically, his techniques focus on reframing. And so the first one is, don't exaggerate. Like I think you could say that's sort of the cluster is don't exaggerate. And the first reframing. Don't
puff it up.
And the first reframing is go from global to specific. And so we see this a lot in our coaching because we do a lot with managers and they'll come in and they'll be like, everybody's lazy. And I'm like, wait, let's pull that back a little bit. List out the people who are lazy. And then it's like sometimes only one person, and so we've gone from everybody to one person. It's like Bob. It's almost always one or two people in a department that is, just, what they're saying is really that their laziness is taking up the full space in their head.
Yeah. But this one person is overwhelming.
Right. But not that everybody's actually lazy.
Right.
And so when we do that exercise, it takes them from this thing that is overwhelming where everybody is lazy and you just feel like there's nothing you can really do about that to, okay, I got one or two people that I need to get on top of and try to figure out what's happening with them to get their work output where we need it. And that's doable.
Yeah.
And so that's the first sort of reframing that Seligman has. And then the second one that I really like is permanent to impermanent. And I think we can go back to my mom's story on that. At some point, initially, this wasn't permanent. She was going to get better and she was going to live another 10 years. And then at some point of not getting better, although she was improving, and I kept reminding her of that, at some point she started to feel like this was how it was going to be for the rest of her life, and this was unacceptable. And so we had to pull her back into, no, this is the progress you've made, and you are getting better, and this is just a temporary thing, and you have to go through the PT, and that's really hard, but it ends.
Yeah.
And so it's, it goes from feeling like things will never be the same, and this is your new reality to this is your current reality, but it's not for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. Yeah, that in a lot of the readings that we've done on this idea of making an adjustment in how you're thinking about the adversity. And in the 2 points that you're making now, yeah, instead of it being huge and pervasive, make it be very specific.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say that the third technique under adjust, this one doesn't come from Seligman, but I think it's a neighbor because it's reframing, is take it from being a problem, change your story from this being a problem or a threat to this being a challenge or an opportunity.
And how would you reframe your mom's? Did you try to reframe your mom when she had that wreck?
So, the challenge for her was, this will be hard, but when you get over the PT, you're probably actually going to be a little bit better off structurally because she had, like
surgeries that needed to be done were getting done.
Right.
Yeah. That they hadn't been done before the wreck, but then now they had to be done.
Right.
Yeah. Kind of interesting. And, but yeah, that's the kind of reframe.
Mm-hmm. And we react differently. Like when it's a threat, people tend to shut down.
Yeah.
When we look at it like it's a challenge or an opportunity, it tends to make people engage.
Yeah.
And maybe be almost a little excited about what the future might be. Like even though the present isn't so great.
Yeah.
I think it helps stimulate a little bit of excitement over what might come.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense.
And so we started talking about trips with my mom. Like, okay, well, you get back on your feet, and you go through all these procedures that you've needed forever anyway. Then, let's hit this next vacation spot that you want to do. Like she really wants to do Yellowstone.
Oh, yeah. Something to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
so
right,
that takes care of adjust. You want to hit action?
Yeah. All right, that's the third. We're knocking out our A's. Acknowledge and affirm your reality. Make adjustments, reframe away from problem towards possibility. The one thing I would say about that is probably a lot of people listening to this podcast have heard about Carol Dweck's work on growth mindset. And that basically we want to be alert, to be thinking in terms of how can I add to my capabilities, not I've got a fixed amount of talent, energy, drive, opportunity. And that's kind of, she calls it fixed birth growth mindset. And so thinking through, with your mom, her challenge after the wreck was, okay, there's still more to do. There's still more that I can get more mobility after this. My mobility isn't limited now to what I have. I can get more because I'm having these surgeries. I'll be able to go and see Yellowstone. It's still on the bucket list, as opposed to, well, I guess that's it. I'm done with the bucket list. And so I think it's important to try to catch ourselves when we start thinking in terms of that fixed mindset and remember, okay, wait a minute. Now that I see what I'm dealing with as it is, that first kind of acknowledgement, now let me start making adjustments and act, reframe this, improvise. I should say reframe it, try to see what's positive. And then that leads to the third step we're talking about, which is take action, do something, improvise. And I remember the kind of a great story is we visited friends of ours, and it was a husband, and he had three young boys, a man with three young boys, and his wife was in the reserves, but she got called up for a year. And it was like, it happened quick. It happened within, I think, a month. Called up and then boom, gone. And so basically it was daddy daycare, and he had a job. And we went and visited partway into this deployment, and they had like a huge piece of plywood with 4 posters on it of everybody's schedule, like out for weeks.
I think it was out for months. But
But it was like down to the hour.
It was down to the hour.
It was nuts.
They knew exactly what they were going to be doing at any hour of the day.
It was
There was a lot of PT in there too.
Yeah. Their solution to this adversity, 3 young boys and a father who lost their mom for a year on deployment, gone. And, and worrisome. This was, she went to, I think, Afghanistan.
She went to a real place.
Right. She wasn't deploying to Tahiti. She's in the stuff.
Right.
And they chose to basically fill their year with activity and action and trying new stuff and going different places. And it did well for them, kept them together. They were fine. She came back and they reunited as a family. It's all good. But for us, it's a lesson. You don't need to act like that. You don't need to plan it out that much. But I remember years ago when we were doing the leadership conference with Howard, we talked about Howard Prince in season 1. We had Michael Powell, Colin Powell's son, out, and he was in an accident in a Jeep, and it flipped on him, and it crushed he was in the Army, and it crushed his, I think, pelvis. And so he had an extensive rehabilitation. And he tells the story about this. He told us the story in the leadership conference. He basically said, there were days when I didn't want to keep treading water. I just wanted to quit. The rehabilitation was going to be terrible. My Army career was over. I'm the son of this famous general. Why bother? All of the things that he was having to contend with, not to mention pain and, being laid up in a hospital. And he said, basically, once he realized he was getting close to stopping, he's like, that's it. I can never stop, no matter what. I can't ever stop. And he didn't. And he got better and he's able to walk and got discharged from the Army. And then, years later would go on to become chairman of the FCC. And when we were talking to him in the conference, he was the chairman of the FCC. And another great example of when we think about what makes people resilient, if I can just summarize this whole first chunk that we've been talking about, they see it for what it is. They're not assuming or hoping that it's going to get better. Or you may be like, well, it'd be nice if it would, but they're not counting on that. And they're reframing it to, what can I learn from this? How can I grow? What's the possibility here for development of some kind? Whether that's, me honestly saying, I'm learning to be more patient now, going through what I'm going through with my dad. That's true. That's not false. That's true.
It's also not exaggerating.
Right. Yeah, it's not puffed up. I haven't puffed up how bad this is. I haven't puffed up how long this is going to last. I haven't puffed up the impact of this on my life. I'm still able to talk to my dad. We're still able to go on vacation. So it hasn't changed everything. But it's changed some stuff. Mm-hmm. Which we've changed where we live. We're spending a lot more time, with my parents. And then this last piece of take action, keep swimming, don't stop what you're doing. And that was nice. We were reinforced in this early on in talking with my parents, just to kind of close out this piece of it. And I asked my dad, what would you like me to do? What Alzheimer's is, you're at the beginning of it. And he said, I want you to live your life. And that's what we've been doing. That's that last plank. Keep moving, take action, adapt, improvise.
Find the places where you can take action.
Yeah. Find the places where you can. Don't obsess about all the places that you can't. And that's where this topic is very tricky, because there's a lot of ways to go in the gutter. You have to see it for what it is. without getting too much of a rose-colored glasses. You have to try to take action, but not act to the point of diverting yourself away from what's actually happening.
Right. It's action to move forward,
Yeah.
but not action to ignore
Yeah.
or put your head in the sand, basically.
Yeah. 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 And you've got to look for a growth. You've got to basically reframe to a positive without trivializing what you're going through. Remember back to the very first thing we said about resilience not being stable. Just because past performance is no guarantee of future performance, as they say in the stock market. And even if you royally screwed it up last time, this time could be different.
Sure.
You could deploy a more resilient response this time. Yeah.
Right. And possibly some of that's because you learned something from the last time.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, that you were able to actually see, I did this wrong, I did this wrong.
I spent too much time in denial the last time.
Yeah. We didn't jump on it quick enough. Yeah. And start my countermeasures for dealing with it. Yeah. Okay.
And so those are the 3 A's. Thanks again for joining us on the Management Muse. We appreciate likes, stars, downloads, shares, and subscriptions. For more information on the resources that help us generate this content, check out the reference material in our show notes. Special thanks to Rebecca Henley, Abby Ariano, and Ariel Villafane. Thank you. See you next time.